I don't think you ever really expect your life to fall apart. There's no warning, no sign that everything you know is about to come crumbling down. And even when you feel it happening, it's like watching the world fall into pieces through a fogged window. You can't act fast enough, and when you do, it's already too late. It all started with a phone call. That's where everything began to shift for me. A phone call that I would later come to regret answering. At the time, I didn't know that it would be the moment everything changed. I was sitting in my usual spot on the couch, working on a project. I wasn't expecting any calls, so when my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number, I almost didn't pick up. But something told me I should. Maybe it was the strange intuition we sometimes get, or maybe it was just the boredom of being alone in the house for hours. Hello. The voice on the other end was calm, collected. Too collected. Mr. Tanner? The man said, sounding official. This is Samuel Gates. I'm calling on behalf of your wife, Ms. Lena Tanner. At the mention of Lena, my pulse quickened. It wasn't unusual for me to get a call about Lena, but there was something in the way this guy spoke that immediately put me on edge. Lena. I repeated, unsure where this was going. Is something wrong? The man cleared his throat. We are currently in the process of finalizing the paperwork for your divorce. I was just reaching out to inform you of the next steps and let you know that we'll need you to sign the documents as soon as possible. I froze. Divorce? My mind couldn't process the words. Divorce? Lena? My wife of 5 years. What was this man talking about? No, there's been some kind of mistake, I stammered. I don't know what this is about, but Lena and there's no way we're getting a divorce. I need to speak to her. The voice on the other end didn't waver. Mr. Tanner, I can assure you, this is not a mistake. Ms. Tanner has made it clear that she wishes to proceed with the dissolution of your marriage. You'll be contacted by my office soon to discuss the details. Thank you for your time. The line went dead before I could even respond. My hand was still gripping the phone, the screen staring back at me in disbelief. What in the world just happened? I've always considered myself a patient man. A man who didn't jump to conclusions, who didn't assume the worst. But as I sat there, I couldn't stop my mind from racing. Lena had never mentioned anything about divorce. We had our issues, sure. Who doesn't? But nothing that serious. Nothing that would make her want to throw everything away. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, trying to make sense of it all. This couldn't be real. Lena wasn't like that. She wouldn't just end things without warning. Not after everything we'd been through. Still, as the minutes ticked by, the weight of the conversation settled in. The silence in the house was deafening. I hadn't heard from Lena since the morning. Nothing unusual, since she had been working late lately, but now I began to wonder. Had she been planning this? Did she already know, for days, maybe weeks, that this was coming? I couldn't get the lawyer's words out of my head. Ms. Tanner has made it clear that she wishes to proceed. The idea of Lena, my Lena, choosing to walk away without even a conversation, without a single word to me, it was maddening. I couldn't let it go. I wouldn't. I needed answers. And I would get them, one way or another. But before I could pick up the phone to call her directly, another thought crept in. What if I was making a mistake? What if she had already made up her mind? What if my trying to reach out was just pushing her further away? I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure of anything anymore. But I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to let this slide. Something wasn't right, and I was going to find out what it was. I grabbed my jacket and headed out the door. I had no plan, no clear idea of what I was going to do, but I had to see Lena. I had to hear it from her. Because right now, everything felt like a bad dream. And I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of something far worse. The drive to Lena's office felt like it took forever. My hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, my mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. What had I missed? How could I not have seen this coming? I kept replaying every moment, every conversation we had over the past few weeks. Could there have been some sign that I overlooked? But everything seemed normal. Or was it? As I pulled into the parking lot of her office building, a familiar sense of dread washed over me. Lena's work was demanding, and she often worked late, but I hadn't seen her leave the office when I called her phone this afternoon. It went straight to voicemail, something I wasn't used to. I should have known that was the first clue something wasn't right. I took a deep breath and walked inside. The receptionist looked up from her desk, offering a half smile. "Can I help you?" "I'm looking for Lena Tanner," I said, trying to sound calm, though my voice betrayed me. "I need to speak to her." The receptionist hesitated, glancing at her computer. "I'm sorry, Mr. Tanner, but Ms. Tanner has left for the day. She's actually been gone for a while now." Gone. My stomach sank. Lena never left early, especially on a workday. "Do you know where she went?" I asked, my voice growing sharper. She shook her head. "I'm afraid I don't. But if you'd like, I can leave a message for her when she gets back." I didn't want to leave a message. I needed answers now, not later. But something told me I wouldn't get them here, so I turned and walked out, my mind still swirling in confusion. I sat in my car, staring out the windshield, unsure of what to do next. I couldn't just let this go. I couldn't go home and pretend like everything was fine when it was clear that Lena had made a decision without telling me. She was my wife. How could she just cut me out like that? After a few minutes of sitting in silence, I decided I wasn't going to wait for her to come to me. If Lena wasn't going to answer my calls, then I would take matters into my own hands. I drove to our house, my heart pounding with every mile. The drive seemed endless, as if the weight of the situation was pushing down on me, making it harder to breathe. When I arrived home, I saw her car parked in the driveway. My chest tightened. She was here. Lena was here. But where was she? I stepped out of the car, a feeling of unease crawling up my spine. The front door was slightly ajar, and I could hear soft voices coming from inside. My first instinct was to walk in and demand answers, but something held me back. I stood there for a moment, frozen, trying to make sense of what was happening. It felt like I was on the edge of a cliff, and if I took one wrong step, I'd fall. I slowly walked up to the door and pushed it open, my heart pounding in my ears. The house was eerily quiet, save for the low murmur of voices. I moved cautiously through the hallway, towards the living room, where the voices seemed to be coming from. As I rounded the corner, my breath caught in my throat. Lena was sitting on the couch, her body turned away from me. But she wasn't alone. There, sitting beside her, was a man. A man I didn't recognize. His hand was resting on the back of the couch, close enough that I could see the way his fingers hovered just inches from her shoulder. The intimacy of the gesture made my blood run cold. Lena didn't see me. She was too busy talking to him, her face animated in a way I hadn't seen in weeks. She was laughing, leaning into his words, as if there was nothing wrong in the world. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, unable to move, my heart sinking deeper with every passing second. What was happening? Who was this man? Why was he here? And why did Lena look so at ease with him, when she hadn't looked at me like that in months? I felt a surge of anger, but it was quickly replaced by something darker, something colder. Betrayal. My mind raced with questions I couldn't answer. Could this be the reason Lena wanted the divorce? Was she already seeing someone else? Was this man the one she had chosen over me? I didn't know how much time had passed before Lena turned to look at me. When our eyes met, her expression shifted. It wasn't shock, like I expected, but something else. Guilt, maybe? But there was no apology, no remorse in her eyes. Only a cold acceptance. "Lyle," she said, her voice soft. Too soft. "We need to talk." I didn't answer. I couldn't. Instead, I just stood there, staring at her, trying to piece together the fragments of my shattered reality. The man beside her stood up, his presence looming over me. "You should listen to her," he said, his tone calm, almost condescending. "It's better if you hear it from her." My fists clenched, but I didn't move. I wanted to lash out, to scream, to demand answers, but I knew I wouldn't get them. Not from him. Not from her. I started, but the words stuck in my throat. Lena stood up and walked towards me, her eyes filled with a strange mixture of pity and something else I couldn't quite place. "I didn't want you to find out like this," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I've made my decision. It's over, Lyle." The man stepped forward, placing a hand on her shoulder, as if to reassure her. I wanted to strike him, to shove him out of the house, but I didn't. I couldn't. I felt hollow, like a shell of the man I used to be. "What is this?" I finally asked, my voice breaking. "Who is he?" Lena didn't flinch. "His name is James. And he's someone who's been there for me when you weren't." The words hit me like a slap to the face. Someone who's been there for me when you weren't. I looked at James, who stood there watching me with a look of amusement, as if he were enjoying watching my world fall apart. I could feel the heat rising in my chest, but I couldn't stop the coldness that was slowly seeping into my bones. I had been betrayed, but the worst part? I had never seen it coming. "Lena," I whispered, feeling the weight of the words crush me. You're leaving me for him? She didn't answer. Instead, she just nodded, a single tear slipping down her cheek. But I couldn't tell if it was for me or for herself. And in that moment, I realized the truth. My wife, the woman I had trusted with everything, had already made her choice. And there was nothing I could do to change it. The words Lena had spoken felt like a punch to the gut, but somehow, I couldn't move. I wanted to scream, to demand she tell me everything, but I felt paralyzed. The man, James, still stood there, watching me with a calmness that only made my anger burn hotter. Lena, my wife, the woman I had been with for over 5 years, had made her decision, and now, in front of me, it was clear that she wasn't the person I thought she was. Lena, I finally managed to choke out, my voice hoarse. You're really leaving me for him? I couldn't believe it. I was looking at her, waiting for some flicker of regret, some hesitation in her eyes, but all I saw was resignation. She was already gone, mentally, emotionally, and now, physically. This was over, and she was no longer the woman I had known. Lena turned her face towards James and gave him a small, almost imperceptible nod. I hated how easy it was for her. I hated how she didn't even flinch when she said the words that cut so deep. I'm sorry, Lyle, but I've made up my mind. I don't want this anymore. Every word felt like it came from a stranger's mouth. This wasn't the woman I had fallen in love with. The woman who promised to stand by me through thick and thin. The woman who had laughed with me, cried with me, built a life with me. What had happened to her? What had happened to us? I don't understand. The words spilled out, almost frantic. What happened, Lena? Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you? My throat closed up. I couldn't even finish the sentence. How had it come to this? Had I missed the signs? Was I that oblivious? Lena's face softened, but it wasn't the soft look I was hoping for. It was the look of someone who had already moved on, who had already made peace with what was happening. She reached out and touched my arm, her fingers brushing the sleeve of my jacket, but I jerked back as if her touch burned me. I didn't want to hurt you, she said, her voice almost too quiet. I never wanted to hurt you, but I had to be honest with myself. I haven't loved you the way I should have for a long time. The words hit me like a wave, crashing over me and leaving me gasping for air. She hadn't loved me? How could she say that? All the years we had spent together, did they mean nothing? My mind raced, trying to process everything, trying to make sense of what was happening. James, still standing beside her, finally spoke up. Look, man, he said, his voice smooth, almost too casual, as if he had done this 1,000 times before. It's not personal. We're better for each other. Lena and I have a connection that you and her never had. She's been trying to tell you this for a while, but now it's time for you to accept it. It's over. His words cut deeper than I expected. He was right there, standing in my house, telling me it was over, as if my opinion didn't even matter. I wanted to lash out, to hit him, to throw him out of my home. But I didn't. I couldn't. I was too stunned, too broken. Why now? I whispered, my voice trembling. Why did you wait until now? What changed? Was I that terrible to you? Lena's eyes softened for a moment, but then they hardened, just a little. No, Lyle. You weren't terrible. You were good to me. But good isn't enough. I need more. I need to feel alive again, not just going through the motions. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I had been nothing but supportive. I had worked hard to give us everything we needed. I thought we were building something real. But I wasn't enough. I never was. James moved slightly closer to Lena, as if offering silent support, and I felt my blood boil. He was her rock now. The man who had slipped into our lives unnoticed. The man who had taken my place. He wasn't even trying to hide it. I'm sorry, Lyle, Lena said, her voice almost too quiet now. But this is the way it has to be. I've made my choice. The finality in her words was like a door slamming shut. There would be no more discussions, no more pleading, no more bargaining. She was done, and she had already moved on. I stood there, numb, trying to process everything. My life, the life I had worked so hard to build, was slipping away. I could feel it, like sand falling through my fingers. The house that once felt like a home now felt cold and foreign. The woman I had loved, the woman I had trusted, was no longer the person standing in front of me. I couldn't bring myself to say anything else. I couldn't fight it. The tears I had been holding back were threatening to spill over, but I refused to let them show. I wasn't going to let them see me break. Not now. Not in front of him. I turned and walked out of the room, my steps heavy, like I was dragging myself through quicksand. My head was spinning, my mind a mess of confusion, pain, and betrayal. I needed to get out. I needed to be away from them. From all of this. As I reached the door, I heard Lena call after me, but I didn't stop. "Lyle," she said softly. "I never meant for it to end like this." But her voice was distant, as if she were talking from another world. A world that didn't include me. I slammed the door behind me, and for a moment, I just stood there, letting the night air wash over me. But even the cool breeze couldn't clear the suffocating cloud that had settled over me. I didn't know where to go, what to do, or how to even start picking up the pieces of my life. But I knew one thing for sure. I was no longer the man I was before. And the worst part? I didn't know if I would ever be him again. The drive home was a blur. I couldn't focus on the road. Everything was distorted. My mind kept replaying what had just happened, as though I was stuck in some endless loop. I had never imagined something like this would happen. It felt like I was in a nightmare, one that I couldn't wake up from. I kept telling myself, this isn't real. It can't be real. But it was. Lena and James. The two of them together, so at ease with each other, while I stood there, destroyed. I had never felt more alone in my life. Even though I was surrounded by the usual sights of our neighborhood, everything felt alien. The house I once called home no longer felt like a sanctuary. It felt like a prison, a place where the past was suffocating me. I pulled into the driveway and just sat there for a while, my hands gripping the steering wheel, trying to steady my breath. The house loomed in front of me, the windows dark, almost like the empty eyes of a ghost. The idea of walking back through that door was unbearable. But I couldn't leave. I couldn't just run away from this. I needed to understand what had happened. I needed to get answers. After a few moments, I finally forced myself out of the car and inside the house. I didn't bother turning on the lights. The darkness felt more fitting. It seemed like the only thing that matched my mood. I made my way to the living room and sat down on the couch, staring at the empty space where Lena had sat only hours ago. The air was thick with tension, like I was waiting for something to happen, something I couldn't predict. But nothing happened. It was just silence. The silence was deafening. I tried to call her, but her phone went straight to voicemail. I texted her. Nothing. I kept doing this for the next few hours, until I finally realized how futile it was. She had made it clear that she had already moved on. She was with James now, and I had no place in her life anymore. But still, something in me resisted. I wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. I had to confront her. I had to understand why she had chosen him over me, why she had destroyed everything we had. But I wasn't prepared for the answer I was going to get when I finally tracked her down the next day. It was late afternoon when I decided to go to her office again. I had no idea what I was going to say, but I had to see her, even if it was just to ask her the one question that haunted me. Why? When I arrived, I parked across the street and just sat there for a moment, watching the office building in front of me. It felt like the world was holding its breath. I didn't want to do this. I didn't want to see her like this, like she was already lost to me. But I needed to hear it from her. I needed to understand. I walked inside the building, past the receptionist, who barely acknowledged me. The elevator ride to Lena's floor felt like an eternity. My heart was racing, my palms sweating. I wasn't sure what I was going to say, but I knew I had to say something. When I reached her office, I stood outside for a moment, gathering my thoughts. I could hear her voice through the door, low and steady. She was on the phone, talking to someone. I didn't want to interrupt, but I couldn't wait anymore. I had to confront her. I knocked on the door. There was a brief pause before she answered, her voice soft. "Come in." I opened the door and stepped inside. Lena looked up, her eyes widening when she saw me. For a moment, we just stood there, staring at each other. I could see the conflict in her eyes, the hesitation. But it was too late for that. The damage had been done. She put down the phone and stood up. "Lyle, what are you doing here?" "I need to talk to you," I said, my voice trembling despite myself. "I need to understand. Why? Why him? Why not me?" Lena looked away, her fingers fidgeting with the edge of her desk. She seemed distant, like she was already preparing herself for this conversation. But I wasn't prepared. I wasn't ready to hear what she was going to say. "Lyle," she began, her voice quiet but firm. "I've been trying to figure this out for months. You and I, our relationship, it wasn't working anymore. You were always busy, always distant. I felt like I was living in a shadow, like I was just another part of your routine." Her words hit me like a slap. Distant? Shadow? Had I really been that bad? Had I really ignored her that much? I tried to speak, but she raised a hand to stop me. You don't get it, she continued, her voice breaking slightly. I loved you, I really did. But it wasn't enough. I needed more. I needed someone who could make me feel alive again. And James, he does that. He makes me feel seen. He makes me feel like I matter. I stood there, dumbfounded. I wanted to say something, anything to make her understand, but I couldn't. There was nothing I could say that would change what had already been decided. She had already made her choice. Lena, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I never wanted to hurt you. I never wanted to make you feel alone. I tried. I tried to be everything you needed. She shook her head, a sad smile playing at the corners of her mouth. I know you did. But sometimes, trying isn't enough. You can't keep pouring from an empty cup, Lyle. You were empty, and so was I. And I had to fill that void somewhere else. I felt like the ground had been pulled out from beneath me. It wasn't just that she was leaving me. It was that she had already checked out. She had already made peace with it. She had already moved on. I don't know what to say, I murmured, my throat tight. I don't know how to fix this. You can't fix it, Lyle. It's already broken. And I'm sorry, but I need to let go. Lena's eyes softened, but it wasn't the softness I had hoped for. It was pity. I stood there in silence for a few moments, feeling my world unraveling even further. I wanted to fight, to argue, but I knew it was pointless. She had made her decision, and nothing I said would change it. I turned to leave, my heart heavier than it had ever been. But before I reached the door, Lena called out, Lyle, I'm sorry. I really am. But I can't go back. And with that, I walked out of her life. Again, I couldn't breathe. Each step I took towards the door felt heavier than the last. The finality in her words had crushed me, but even worse was the coldness with which she delivered them. The Lena I had once known, the woman who had been my everything, was now a stranger. I stepped into the elevator, my fingers shaking as I pressed the button to the ground floor. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to break something. Anything to release the pressure that was building inside of me. But I didn't. I couldn't. I just stood there, staring at the elevator doors, watching as they slowly closed in front of me. The descent from the top floor to the ground was slow, agonizing, as if the building itself was mocking me. When I finally reached the lobby, I made my way to the exit, not bothering to look back. It was pointless. Lena had made her choice. I was just a chapter in her life that she was ready to close. The woman I thought I'd spend forever with had already moved on. And as much as I wanted to fight for her, to make her see how much I loved her, the truth was, she wasn't the same woman anymore. She had already found someone else, James. The man who had quietly slipped into our lives, uninvited, and had now claimed the space I had once occupied. It burned to even think about it. I didn't know him, didn't know what he had that I didn't. I wanted to hate him, to blame him for everything, but deep down, I knew the truth. It wasn't his fault. This had nothing to do with him. This was all on Lena. She had chosen him because she didn't see anything left in me. I got into my car, the weight of everything crashing down on me. I drove aimlessly for hours, trying to escape the thoughts that were consuming me, but they never stopped. I kept thinking about the moments we shared, the promises we made, the dinners we used to cook together, the nights spent watching movies, the mornings we'd wake up next to each other with no cares in the world. But it wasn't enough. None of it was enough. I ended up at the beach. I had no idea why, but there was something about the ocean that always seemed to calm my mind, even in the worst of times. The waves were crashing against the shore, the sound of the water mixing with the distant calls of seagulls. It was peaceful, almost too peaceful. And yet, as I stood there, staring out into the horizon, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been lost forever. I don't know how long I stood there, lost in my thoughts, but eventually, my phone buzzed. I picked it up without thinking, my heart racing when I saw the name on the screen. It was Lena's number. For a split second, I almost didn't answer, but I couldn't help myself. I pressed the phone to my ear, my voice barely a whisper. Lena. Lyle, she said softly, almost as if she were hesitant. I didn't want to do this over the phone, but I thought it was the right time to tell you. I felt a chill run through me. Tell me what? I asked, my heart pounding. There's something I need to admit, Lena continued, her voice wavering. I wasn't completely honest with you when we talked earlier. There's more to it. There's something I've been hiding. My mind immediately started to race. What was she talking about? What was she hiding? Was there more to this than just her falling out of love with me? Had I missed something? Had she been seeing James behind my back all along? Lena, what do you mean? What are you not telling me? I demanded, my voice growing sharper. I don't know how to say this, but James isn't just someone I've been seeing, she said quietly. He's been in my life for longer than you think. My stomach dropped. The words hit me like a ton of bricks. James wasn't just a new man in her life. He had been there all along, quietly weaving his way into our relationship, into our lives. I had no idea. No idea at all. What the hell are you talking about? I said, my voice rising. How long has this been going on? How long have you been lying to me? I'm sorry, Lyle, Lena said, her voice breaking. It started a while ago. It wasn't planned. At first, it was just something small, a connection I didn't know how to explain. But it grew. And before I knew it, I was in love with him. In love with him. The words echoed in my mind, over and over, like a death sentence. The woman I had loved, the woman I had trusted with everything, had been in love with someone else the whole time. And I hadn't seen it. I had been blind. She had been slipping away from me for months, and I hadn't even noticed. I didn't want to hurt you, Lyle, she continued, her voice filled with regret. But I couldn't keep lying to you. I've been living two lives, and I can't do it anymore. James is who I'm meant to be with. I'm sorry. I stood there, frozen, unable to speak. The air around me felt thick, suffocating. Every breath I took seemed to fill my chest with more weight, more emptiness. I had never felt so betrayed, so completely and utterly alone. And then it hit me. This wasn't just about James. This was about everything. About how Lena had been slipping away from me for months. About how I had failed to see it. I hadn't been paying attention. I had let the silence grow between us, let the distance grow between us. I had been too absorbed in my own world to realize that Lena was no longer a part of it. I wanted to say something. I wanted to scream at her, to ask her how she could do this to me, to us. But I didn't. I didn't have the energy. All I could do was listen. Listen to the woman who had once been my everything tear apart, everything we had. I have to go, Lyle. Lena's voice broke through my thoughts. I'm sorry. I hope someday you'll understand. I really do. And with that, she hung up. I stood there, holding the phone in my hand, staring at the ocean, feeling like I was drowning in a sea of regret and pain. The worst part was, I couldn't even blame her. She had given me every opportunity to see the truth. But I had been blind. I had ignored the signs. And now, it was too late. The ocean stretched out before me, vast and endless, much like the emptiness I felt inside. The world was moving forward, but I was stuck in this moment, unable to escape it. I stayed on the beach long after the call ended, my mind numb, my body exhausted. The sun was dipping below the horizon, casting a golden hue over the ocean, but I couldn't bring myself to appreciate the beauty of it. The world around me felt like it was turning in slow motion, while I was frozen in place, caught in a storm I couldn't control. Lena's words echoed in my head like a constant drumbeat. I'm in love with him. I couldn't escape them. No matter how hard I tried, I kept hearing them, over and over again, like they were a part of the soundtrack to my life now. Everything had changed. I had changed. The man I was before felt like a distant memory, someone I used to know. I didn't know how long I stood there, staring at the waves, but eventually, I forced myself to leave. The car ride back home felt like another eternity. The streets were empty, the city lights blurring as I drove through the streets, lost in my own thoughts. I didn't know what I was going to do next. I didn't know where to go, what to say, or even how to move forward. When I got home, the house felt colder than ever. The emptiness was suffocating. It was as though every corner of this place had become a reminder of what I had lost. Lena's things were still here, her coat hanging by the door, her shoes scattered in the hallway, but she wasn't here, and she wasn't coming back. I walked through the house, every step heavy with the weight of everything that had happened. I couldn't stop thinking about James. I didn't know much about him. Hell, I didn't know anything about him. But I wanted to. I wanted to know how he had wormed his way into Lena's life, how he had become the person she ran to when I wasn't enough. Was it that easy? Was I so replaceable? I couldn't stay here. I couldn't keep looking at the walls that held the echoes of our laughter, the pictures of us on vacations, on holidays, in moments when we thought we had forever. I grabbed my jacket, my keys, and walked out the door without thinking. I didn't have a destination in mind, but I knew I couldn't stay here. Not tonight. The night air was sharp, biting at my skin as I walked aimlessly through the streets. It was strange, almost surreal, how everything felt so normal around me. The world was still turning. People were still going about their lives, oblivious to the fact that my life had just shattered into a million pieces. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, what I expected to find, but I knew I couldn't keep sitting at home, pretending everything was fine when nothing was. I ended up at a bar. It wasn't a place I frequented, but it was dark, quiet, and the kind of place where I could hide in the corner and not be bothered. I took a seat at the bar, ordered a drink, and let the alcohol burn through my chest as I tried to focus on something, anything, other than Lena and James. The bartender kept giving me sideways glances, probably wondering what the hell a guy like me was doing alone at a bar on a Thursday night. But I didn't care. I wasn't here to make friends. I was here to numb the pain, to drown out the thoughts that kept circling in my mind like vultures. As I sat there, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the mirror behind the bar. I hardly recognized the person staring back at me. My hair was messy, my face pale, eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep and too many tears. I looked like someone who had just lost everything. And I had. Lena was gone. And the worst part? I couldn't even blame her. The man in the mirror looked like a stranger, a shell of who I used to be. I didn't know this person, didn't know how he got here, didn't know how he was supposed to move forward. I took another drink, hoping it would drown out the voices in my head. But it didn't. Nothing would. It wasn't until hours later, when the bar was beginning to empty, that I finally realized what I had to do. I had been running from the pain, running from the truth. But the truth was inescapable. I had to face it. I had to face her. The only way I could move on, the only way I could start to heal, was to confront what had happened. I had to talk to Lena again. I had to see her face to face, hear her words, and, most importantly, I had to see if there was any hope for me, any chance to reclaim what I had lost. I left the bar and drove to her apartment. I wasn't sure what I was going to say, but I knew I couldn't keep running from this. I needed answers. I needed closure. When I arrived, I sat in the car for a long time, watching her apartment window. The lights were on, and I could see her silhouette moving around inside. I took a deep breath and forced myself to get out of the car. I walked to her door and stood there for a moment, gathering the courage to knock. I wasn't sure if I was ready for this, but I had no other choice. I knocked. There was a long pause before she answered. She opened the door slowly, her face softening when she saw me standing there. I could see the surprise in her eyes, but there was no warmth, no longing, just coldness, like a wall had already been built between us. "Lyle," she said softly, her voice betraying no emotion. "What are you doing here?" "I need to talk to you," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "Please, just hear me out." She hesitated for a moment before stepping aside, allowing me into her apartment. The door clicked shut behind me, and I felt like I was entering some new world, one where I no longer belonged. "I didn't think you'd come here," Lena said quietly, her eyes meeting mine for the first time since our last conversation. "I had to," I said, my voice a little stronger now. "I have to know if there's anything left of what we had, Lena. Is there any chance for us? Or have you really moved on?" She looked at me for a long moment, her eyes searching mine, almost as if she were looking for something she had lost. Then she sighed, her shoulders slumping. "Lyle, I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. I don't know how to fix this, how to fix us. I can't go back. I'm not the same person I was." I stood there, my heart pounding in my chest. The finality in her words hit me harder than anything she had said before. This was it. She was gone. "I wish I could say it's going to be okay," she whispered, "but I can't. I've made my choice." And that was it. There was no going back. I was left standing there, in her apartment, in the life I thought we had built together, realizing it was already over. The sound of her words hung in the air like a storm, heavy and unrelenting. "I can't go back," Lena had said. And with those words, the world I had known shattered into pieces. Every part of me wanted to scream, to beg her to reconsider, to fight for us. But as I stood there, watching her face, I realized something. She was already gone. The woman I had spent years with, the woman who had once been my everything, was no longer the same person. I took a shaky step back, my chest tight with a mix of anger and grief. "You've already decided," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. It wasn't a question. It was the painful truth. She had made up her mind long before I showed up here, long before I gathered the courage to face her again. Lena didn't answer. She just stood there, her arms crossed, a look of resignation in her eyes. I couldn't tell if she was relieved or regretful or if she was just as lost as I was. But one thing was clear. I wasn't the man she wanted anymore. And no matter how much I wished it were different, that fact would never change. Lyle, her voice was soft, almost gentle, as if she were speaking to a stranger. I don't want to hurt you, but this is the way it has to be. You deserve someone who can love you the way you need to be loved, someone who can give you everything I couldn't. I wanted to say something in response, anything to stop this from being real, but the words wouldn't come. What was there to say? How could I argue with the truth when it was right there in front of me, standing in the form of the woman I thought I knew? I turned away, walking towards the window, my eyes scanning the darkened city streets below. The world outside seemed so distant, so untouchable, like it belonged to someone else. I wasn't sure how much time had passed before I heard Lena's voice again. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, as though she were speaking to herself more than to me. "I never meant for it to happen this way. But I've made my choice, Lyle. And so have you." Her words cut deep, but they also made me realize something. She wasn't just closing the door on us. She was pushing me to close it too. She had already let go. And now, I had to do the same. I turned back to face her, my eyes meeting hers for a brief moment. "I don't know how to let go," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "How do you just let go of someone you've spent your whole life with? How do you walk away from everything you thought you had?" Lena's eyes softened, but she didn't move closer. "You don't walk away from it all at once," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You let go piece by piece. And eventually, you'll realize you're stronger for it. But you can't keep holding on to something that's already broken." Her words echoed in my mind, replaying over and over again as I stood there, trying to make sense of it all. She was right, in a way. I had been holding on to something that had slipped through my fingers long ago. I had been holding on to the person I thought Lena was, the person I thought I knew. But that wasn't who she was anymore. And maybe, just maybe, that wasn't who I was either. I looked around the apartment, her apartment, and saw all the things that once meant something to me. The books on the shelf, the picture frames with our smiling faces, the couch where we used to sit together after long days. It was all still here, but it felt empty, as if it had lost its meaning. "I don't know how to be that man anymore," I said quietly, more to myself than to her. The one who had everything figured out. The one who knew how to love. Lena took a deep breath, walking toward me. Her presence, though once comforting, now felt like a shadow, something that was no longer meant to be. "I know, Lyle. But sometimes we have to lose ourselves to find who we're really meant to be. I've found who I'm supposed to be. It's just not with you." The finality of her words hit me harder than anything else. I wanted to fight back, to plead for her to reconsider, but I knew it was pointless. It was over, and I had to accept it. "I'm sorry," she said one last time. "But I need to go now. I need to be alone." Her words stung, but I couldn't blame her. She had already gone. Physically, yes, but emotionally, long before. And now, it was my turn to let go. I stood there for a few moments longer, unable to move, as if waiting for something, anything, to change. But nothing did. There was no dramatic conclusion, no sudden realization that would bring us back together. It was just silence, the kind that stretches on forever, until it becomes unbearable. Finally, I nodded and turned to leave. But as I stepped toward the door, I paused. I had to say something, anything, to make this feel real. To make it feel like I had some semblance of control over the situation, even though I knew I didn't. "I hope you're happy," I said, my voice barely audible. "I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for." Lena didn't respond. She didn't need to. She had already made her peace with everything. I wasn't sure if I ever would. I stepped out into the hallway, closing the door behind me softly. The apartment felt further away with each step I took, as if it were slipping further into another life, one that I wasn't a part of anymore. And just like that, I was alone. The cold air hit me as soon as I stepped outside. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know what to do next. But I knew one thing. I couldn't keep running. I had to face this head on, whatever that meant. Because I was done being the man I was before. I had to become someone new. Whether I was ready or not, the world was moving on. And so would I. The night was dark, but as I stepped into the cold, I realized it wasn't just the outside air that was cold, it was me. I felt like I had lost everything, and for the first time in my life, I didn't know who I was anymore. The person I used to be, the man who was so sure of himself, the one who thought he had it all figured out, was gone. And in his place was someone unfamiliar, someone who was still reeling from the wreckage of a life that had been shattered. But as I stood there in the parking lot, the weight of everything bearing down on me, something inside me started to shift. Slowly at first, almost imperceptibly, but it was there. I realized that I was still alive. I was still breathing. I had been through the fire, and while I was burned and broken, I hadn't been consumed by it. For the first time in days, I felt the tiniest spark of hope. I knew it wouldn't be easy. Healing never is. But I also knew that I couldn't stay stuck in the past, not forever. Lena had made her choice, and as much as it hurt, it was her choice to make. I had to let her go, but more importantly, I had to let go of the man I used to be, the man who clung to the past, who let his identity be defined by someone else's love. I got into my car, turned the engine on, and drove without a destination in mind. The road ahead was uncertain, but that was okay. For once, I wasn't afraid of uncertainty. The unknown wasn't a void to be filled with dread. It was a canvas, blank and waiting to be painted with something new. The first few weeks after Lena left were the hardest. I still woke up some mornings with a crushing weight on my chest, the echoes of her absence filling every corner of my life. But with each passing day, I began to find pieces of myself I had forgotten. I went for long walks in the park, something I used to do with her, but had stopped because life had gotten in the way. I rediscovered the books I used to read before I got too busy with work. I took up painting, something I hadn't done in years. Slowly, I started to breathe again, to live again, and to realize that there was a life waiting for me outside the shadow of my past. One evening, I sat down at the small coffee shop I had passed by 1,000 times but had never entered. It was warm inside, the smell of fresh coffee and pastries filling the air. I ordered my drink and sat by the window, watching the world go by. And for the first time in months, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I didn't know where my journey was going, but I knew I was on the right path. It wasn't the path I had planned, the one that included Lena and all the dreams we had built together. But it was my path, and I was learning to embrace it. A few weeks later, I ran into an old friend, someone I hadn't seen in years. We sat down for coffee and caught up. As we spoke, I realized how much I had changed, not just in the way I saw the world, but in the way I saw myself. I was no longer the man who had lost everything. I was the man who had survived, who had faced the darkest days of his life and come out the other side stronger. And as I looked into my friend's eyes, I could see that I wasn't alone. There were people who cared, people who wanted me to keep moving forward, even when it seemed impossible. It wasn't easy. There were days when I still missed Lena, when I wondered what could have been. But those days became fewer and fewer. I began to understand something important. I didn't need anyone to complete me. I was already whole. And one day, I would meet someone who would see that, who would appreciate me for the person I had become, not the person I once was. And so, I kept moving forward. I kept painting, writing, exploring, and learning. I started traveling, visiting new cities, trying new foods, and meeting new people. I began to understand that life didn't end when one chapter closed. It was only the beginning of something new. Months later, as I sat on a beach, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, I realized that I was finally at peace. It wasn't the life I had imagined, but it was mine. And it was beautiful. I had learned to love myself again, to embrace the uncertainty of life, and to trust that everything, no matter how painful or difficult, had a purpose. I had been broken, but now I was whole again. And this time, I was ready for whatever came next. The future wasn't something to fear anymore. It was something to look forward to. And for the first time in a long time, I believed that I deserved to be happy.